This is the GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 391, entitled Why Elite Males Are Misogynists. Description. This flyer explains why most elite males have misogynist attitudes by showing that women are genetically inferior creatures compared to the elite males. Women are both dumber and have a lower IQ variance than men, plus much lower testosterone levels than men, so have greatly inferior track records than men. So such men cannot share their intellectual passions with women, hence their frustration and condescension towards women. The flyer itself. Why Elite Males Are Misogynists, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Just why are so many elite males so misogynistic? For example, Plato, Schopenhauer, Tesla, Newton, etc. I too have a definite misogynist streak in my personality, so feel I have an intuitive understanding why the most talented of males only have one direction to look when observing females, and that is down. Feminists complain bitterly at the condescending attitude of elite males towards women and lash out at it with pejorative terms like MCP, that's male chauvinist pig, mansplaining, etc. This flyer is written from the male angle, taking a masculist perspective, trying to explain to women why the highest performing and most capable of men have such a condescending, cynical and contemptuous attitude towards women's inferior abilities. Before I launch into my own misogynist diatribe, I need to state my own qualifications in case readers feel I'm farting in the wind. I think I can say with no false modesty that I was one of the world leaders in what I called the species dominance debate. That is, the debate on what humanity should do when our machines threaten to become a lot smarter than we are. My very first published academic article was entitled What if AI Succeeds? The Rise of the 21st Century Artellect. It appeared as the cover story of the Artificial Intelligence magazine in the late 1980s, so was way ahead of its time. In those days, only a small handful of thinkers were considering the rise of the massively intelligent machine. There were strictly zero women. Women didn't get involved in the species dominance issue until decades later, and even then in a most superficial and insignificant way. I've always looked down on women when it comes to making pioneering contributions to intellectual debates, to contributing to world intellect. The female contribution to world intellect is negligible, a few % at best. For example, thanks to the internet, it's possible for me to freely download research-level math texts and papers in their tens of thousands, so I have whole libraries of such works. When I occasionally come across one that is written by a woman, my first reaction is of surprise. Oh, a woman! My second reaction is that of disappointment, since I know the odds are almost certain that its quality will be mediocre, lacking genius, since there are so few female genii compared to men, and I'm nearly always right when I look into the text to see how original and brilliant it is. When it comes to intellect, I just don't take women seriously, since there are so few women who are capable of thinking like a man, that is, abstractly, reasoned, not feelings-based, committed, learned, instilled with a passion for a lifetime of learning. My lifetime experience, and I've already lived for a long time, in brackets over 70 years, is that very few women have a real intellectual hunger to understand the world, who can think big picture, asking the deep and broad-ranged questions. The feminists see such male condescension as male chauvinism, as though this male attitude is fully unwarranted, and that women are just as capable as men in producing such works. As a masculist scientist, in brackets, with a Prof. Doctor in front of my name, and as a world leader in some of my specialties, for example, artificial brains, masculism, in brackets, my term, and father of most of its concepts and labels, etc., I have little patience with the level of innumeracy and isinacy of most feminists, who gave up studying math and the sciences as soon as they were allowed to at school because they were not interested in such topics, and as is much more likely the case, because they were not very good at such subjects and preferred to study something intellectually easier that was more person-based, more relationship-based, such as English literature, languages, history, etc., and not math and the sciences that required them to have a, in brackets, male-like math brain. It's frustrating for me when I try to mansplain to innumerate and issinate feminists that women cannot compete with men at the top end of the performance scale because women are just genetically inferior to men at the top end. Feminists fight this utterly threatening idea with all they have, in the same way as the blacks fight the idea that they are the dumbest people in the world, despite the massive scientific evidence showing that this is the case. So, here is my scientific, mathematical justification for my condescension towards women's inferior abilities at the top end of the performance scale, towards women's inferior performance, women's inferior track record in human accomplishment, is something that can be mathematically explained, and explained accurately and well. Take the IQ measurements of a random sample of 1 million people in a large population. Draw a graph of their IQ scores, with the vertical axis being the number of people who score a given IQ value, for example, 103, and the horizontal axis is for the IQ score. Say you're looking at how many people scored 110, so say it's 80,000. In brackets, I'm just making this up. So draw a dot at the 80,000 point on the vertical line crossing the horizontal axis at 110. Do something similar for the IQ scores 111, 112, 113, etc. Then draw a curve connecting all these dots. It will have a bell-shaped form, which is why it's called the bell curve. Most people have scores around the average IQ score of 100, in brackets, unless, for example, you're in Africa, where the average is 70 for blacks and 85 for Arabs, in brackets. Now say that half of your 1 million people sample were women and the other half men. You will get 2 different bell curves. The female bell curve will be taller and thinner than the male bell curve, which will be shorter and fatter. Technically speaking, the male bell curve is said to have a higher variance. That is, its IQ scores over the whole population are more spread out, more varied than the female population. Women's IQ scores are more bunched up. The other major difference between the 2 bell curves is that the average value of the female bell curve is shifted down by 4 IQ points compared to the male bell curve, showing that on average women are dumber than men by 4 IQ points according to modern research. If this is news to you, then Google it, YouTube it. Educate yourself on this, since science says that when the feminists tell you that women are just as capable as men when it comes to intelligence, they are either lying, or as is more likely, they are simply ignorant of IQ science. That is, they are insane, preferring to believe what they want to believe without evidence, which makes them about as credible to my scientifically and mathematically trained mind as religionists or flat earthers. I sneer at both, so of course I sneer at innumerate insane feminists who don't even know the difference between a standard deviation and a mean, the two parameters needed to specify a Bell, in parentheses, Gaussian probability distribution, close brackets, curve. With these two bell curves, male and female, it's possible to predict the proportion of men to women at various IQ levels. That is, one can make very accurate theoretical predictions based on the IQ scores needed to perform at increasingly intellectually demanding tasks and levels. For example, the IQ needed to get a bachelor's degree in mathematics, a master's degree in mathematics, a PhD in mathematics, to become a junior professor in mathematics, to become a full senior professor in mathematics. At this last high level, the mathematical theoretical prediction is that only about 10% of full professors in math are women, and similarly in mathematical physics and in computer science. Those three specialties are my three. And when I looked around the many university departments I have worked in or were familiar with over the decades, that proportion seems to be pretty accurate in practice, in the real world. That is, at about 10%. At the Fields Medal level, or the Abel Prize level, that is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize, but for mathematics, the theoretical prediction is that only one woman in a century will win one. And that is the case today. Only one woman has won the Fields Medal, and only one woman, in brackets, a different woman, has won the Abel Prize. Thus the theoretical prediction and the reality match pretty closely. So we have here a pretty good mathematically based model to predict women's performance levels in a difficult area, that is pure math and math physics. In the US, the average male theoretical physics professor has an IQ of 170. At these exalted levels, there are very few women, due to women's lower average IQ and to women's 10% lower IQ variance, that is, a measure of how spread out or bunched up scores are. In biology, there's a general rule called GMV, that's greater male variance, which says that in any dimorphic species, that is, where the male and female bodies differ, the phenomenon of GMV occurs. Thus, the 10% greater variance of men's IQs relative to women's is merely a specific instance of a very, very general biological phenomenon. All feminists should know about such stuff, but few do. Most feminists are both insane and innumerate, which only increases my level of condescension towards them, seeing them as insane, innumerate children to be mansplained to, because their 10% smaller brains require such condescension. Otherwise, if I give it to them with full male intellectual force, the abstraction level would just blow them away. It would just waft over their pretty little heads. Elite males are mostly heterosexual, as are most men, so would like to be able to share their intellectual passions with the women they penis, so that they can respect the women they give their hearts and sexuality to. But at the top end of the performance scale, for every extremely capable woman, there are 10 men, so that the other 9 go partnerless, in the sense of having a female sexual partner of equal ability. This deep inability of elite men to be able to truly share their minds and intellectual passions with women is a source of deep frustration and contempt for women coming from such men. You only have to look at the misogynist statements of elite men such as Schopenhauer, Plato, Newton, Tesla, etc. to become convinced of this. This is end of part 1.